Okay, now it's on. I'm gonna make sure they have the the link for it though. I'm gonna send it in
Okay.
the chat. But you can go
Thank.
ahead, I think.
Okay. Thank you. Hey everyone. I hope that all of you are having a lovely day thus far. I'm really glad to be here with you. And today's a big one. Today is a big class for us that's really instrumental. Last week when I asked what you wanted to learn about environmental science, that that there's a lot to it as far as the climate is concerned, and so I want to make sure that our live stream is working right now. If some of the TAs could give me a signal that we are good to go.
It's working. I feel like some people might just have to switch the link. They should be here soon.
Okay, great. Thank you, Pedro. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with this lovely piece of art. This lovely piece of art that was done by a student named Roy Park. He's a middle school student, and he did this in 2018. And he wrote this as his reflection after creating this. When I first decided to draw my artwork, I thought of drawing a little polar bear on a block of melting ice, signifying how global warming is affecting our oceans. Then I learned how the thickness and extent of the Arctic ice has been declining rapidly over the last decades, and how the glaciers are also retreating almost everywhere around the world, from the Alps, the Himalayas, the Andes, the Rockies, Alaska, almost everywhere around the world. And then I realized I should be drawing a bear that has already sunk, not one floating on melting ice. This gave me a clearer picture of how our glaciers and ocean animals are sinking away too fast, and it inspired me to draw this picture that I titled Sinking Beauty. It's an illustration of a polar bear sinking from the destruction of humans, displaying the cold, hard facts of our torture of the ocean on its fur. And in the end, I hope the viewer understands this ghastly change to our Earth from my piece and stands with me against this outrage. All of that beauty and hard facts from a middle schooler. And so I want to open our class today with this question: what blocks me from feeling? So I'd like you to take a couple of minutes in your group to think about this. What blocks me from feeling? So it's a big question and not enough time to really dive in, but something for you to consider as you move through your week. So for us to, somebody answered this though, being in a society that doesn't put an emphasis on feeling. And that's huge. It's very true. So I'd like you to start by feeling this morning that rub your hands together, get some energy flowing, get your thoughts flowing, get those feelings flowing. And if you rub your palms together as fast as you can feel that there's heat generated between those palms. And if you stop and you slowly bring your hands apart and really pay attention to what's happening between your hands, you can feel the energy that's pulsing or zapping or moving in between those covers, your hands, the feeling. You can shake it out and try it again. The energy that's moving and flowing. And more beautiful answers are coming into the question of what keeps us from feeling. Social media, the fear of judgment, putting others in front of self, pointlessness, the idea that school keeps you from feeling. These are heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. So let's stop thinking and feeling out there and be right here in this moment. Right here in this moment. The scientific evidence for warming of the climate system is unequivocal. The world is on fire literally from the Amazon to California, from Australia to the Siberian Arctic. The hour is late and the moment of consequences, so long delayed, is now upon us. Do we watch the world burn, or do we choose to do what is necessary to achieve a different future? We have known about the possibility of climate change since the 1930s, and we have been certain that there is human-caused climate change since 1960, for sure, when geochemist Charles Keeling measured the carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere, and he detected an annual rise. And since then, little has been done to counter it. Absent heroic efforts, the world is locked into this dangerous climate change. That was related to a much anticipated report where this statement came from. It was released in October of 2018 by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's a UN-sponsored collection of scientists and researchers from all over the world. We need to limit our global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius in order to preserve the stability of the world's interconnected ecological and societal systems. So over time, there has been global temperature changes. You can see in this from 1880 all the way up to, it looks like about 2015 or so, 14. So these are the global temperature. This is the overarching pattern of weather. That is climate. That is what climate means. It's changed throughout history. Just like in the last 650,000 years, there have been 7 cycles of glaciers that have come and gone. And then the last ice age ended about 7,000 years ago. But these climates, this isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about something that is human caused. We're talking about global warming. And people have moved away from the idea or using the phrase global warming because it almost makes it sound cozy. Now we're in an age of climate chaos. What's happening is that the solar radiation comes through our atmosphere. Our atmosphere is about 50 to 60 miles thick. So that means if I hopped in my car at the beginning of this class and I drove at 60 miles per hour through our atmosphere, I could be in outer space before this class ended. Not a rocket ship, just in my car. So 50 to 60 miles of gases that are held here by gravity. But the heat trapping nature of carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide are holding in the warmth so that it cannot escape or spread out in our atmosphere. So the greenhouse gases, like in this picture, you can see that they're bouncing up and down as the solar radiation warms up the planet. It moves these it keeps the greenhouse gases with gravity in the atmosphere, and then it's moving the energy back toward Earth. And so it's bouncing up and down, and it's not allowing the atmosphere to work the way that it should. So what are these greenhouse gases? There are three things that are causing this. The three major causes of this, particularly in the United States, are cars, power plants, and then the methane that's escaping from oil and gas wells. Methane has 50 times the heat trapping power of carbon dioxide. So this is really an issue. The methane that's escaping from these oil and gas wells is significant. So there's this graph that shows how much carbon dioxide. This isn't showing the methane or the other gases that I just mentioned, nitrous oxide, but this is the carbon dioxide levels. And you can see this is being measured back into 400,000 years ago. And obviously scientists were not there to be measuring it, but the way they do it is they take cores. They drill down into the earth and come up with a core that they can measure these ancient levels of carbon dioxide. So for centuries upon centuries, millennia, the atmospheric carbon dioxide had never been above that level of about 300 parts per million. And now our levels are shooting up rather rapidly. They also are looking at tree rings and ocean sediments and coral reefs to figure these things out. And so what are the effects of this? What's happening related to this is that the overall temperature of our planet is warming. So I'd like you to watch this quick video. Watch this quick video. Hold on just a moment. Here it is. This is over the course of, you can see the years passing in the upper right-hand corner. The change from -2 degrees Celsius to above 2 degrees Celsius. So we're getting into the recent times here. And you can see that when this ended in 2014, the overall course of events of these temperature change is that it's going up and up and up on an average basis. And so that's something that we need to be concerned about. So let me just switch my screen back here. So as we get warmer and warmer, there are other things that are happening. Right now, this is where that IPCC panel met, and they said that we are going to hit this threshold of more than 1.5 degrees Celsius over the whole planet. Right now, you can see that it was approaching or over 2 in a lot of areas, but not all over the world. And so the average of 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius we might hit that threshold in 11 years, which means that's not, it's just not a long time. And so in the point, this report was released 2 years ago. And so in that time, what have people done? Some people, individuals and corporations and governments, have been acting on this research very actively. Not the United States, though, but times they are a-changin'. We need to catch up on the time that has been lost from our past government administration to the current government administration. Previously, we had a president who denied the existence of human-caused climate change, which put us way behind on what we need to do to work toward mitigating this terrible thing that we're up against. And so this is another thing that's happening or has happened. The Paris Climate Agreement, you may have heard about this in the news back in January, particularly, well, in November, when President Trump removed the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement and said that we would not help with the global efforts to lessen the climate effects. But now, on the day that President Biden was signed into office, he rejoined us to the Paris Climate Agreement. And so we have things to catch up on. The idea of this agreement is that it's a legally binding international treaty on climate change. The goal is to limit global warming, and the idea is that we are going to work together worldwide to make this happen. It requires that we have economic and social transformation based on the best available science. And it works on a 5-year cycle of increasingly ambitious climate action carried out by countries. And so the other countries submitted their plans, their nationally determined contributions. Back in November is when those were due. We have not yet done that as the United States, but the plan is that Biden will have that ready to go for Earth Day of this year. So that means it's going to say what we need to do as a nation in order to help this global effort. It's the long-term strategies that are affected here. And so there's going to be there is quick action happening right now with researchers, scientists, and politicians about what can happen. And by this fall, the meeting that's going to happen in Glasgow in November or December of this year is going to be a big deal. This is something to really follow as far as the environment goes. We need to take quick action on this on a lot of different fronts. Those 3 things that I talked about specifically, the cars, the power plants, and the leaking oil rigs. Because we have these effects that are happening right now, the warming of the oceans. So we talked about oceans last week, and we talked about a lot of things that are challenging the oceans. And yet we didn't mention too much about the climate change. Oceans are expected to continue to get warmer both in the top layers and in the deeper waters. Even if people stop adding extra greenhouse gas to the atmosphere now, the oceans will continue to get warmer because they are what's absorbing the heat from the atmosphere. The ocean is taking in the extra heat. But why does it matter? I mean, it seems like a good system, except that those warming oceans, remember the patterns of, of ocean currents, that matters, that those affect the weather patterns. By increasing the temperature, we're going to get more tropical storms and impact more sea life. So the ocean has absorbed about 30% of all carbon dioxide that humans have sent into the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution. And so there's this power in the ocean, except that it is such a fragile space that we can't keep relying on the ocean to do this for us. With the warming of the oceans comes the melting of Antarctica. It's melting from beneath because the water underneath that frozen glaciers, that it's melting from underneath, and the 60% of the planet's fresh water is locked into this massive ice sheet. Scientists have been studying the rates of basal melt, and it's astounding how quickly Antarctica is disappearing. It's releasing releasing the ice as calving glaciers, as splitting of the icebergs, and so I want you to take in. I would appreciate if you take in this video.
Look up. There I am.
Not that one. I'm sorry, just a moment. This one.
I am ice. I move slowly. I keep the world cool. Well, I used to. But
Again,
humans
we're not
keep
seeing the
warming
video
this
for some
planet.
reason. We're seeing you.
I send pieces of me thundering into the
Jen?
nothing.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, just a moment.
I am ice. I move slowly. I keep the world cool. Well, I used to. But humans keep warming this planet. I try to warn you. I send pieces of me thundering into the ocean. You do nothing. I raise sea levels. You do nothing. It has taken you decades to notice. Perhaps I'm not so slow after all.
Ice keeps our planet the way it is, in balance. This annual Arctic sea ice minimum area. Now we're in the Arctic rather than the Antarctic. We're at the top of the globe. Satellites have provided a reliable tool for continuously monitoring changes in the Arctic ice since 1979. And it's been on the decrease consistently as well. So it's showing us that change is happening all over the planet. So there are trends as it goes up and down based on season, and based on year. You can see that it's really unstable. We're talking about millions of kilometers of space of ice. And so the general trend, though, going from 1979 to 2020 is that it's decreasing. It's on a constant decline. And this is really something to take in and be mindful of. There's been a big deal made about the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, ANWR, as it's called, and the choice that we have for opening that land for oil drilling. The move recently allowed leasing on the 1.6 million acre coastal plain. There was an auction of that land. There were 22 tracts up for sale that were right in the middle of the habitat of these caribou. But only half of those tracts were sold. The government was hoping that it would bring in $1 billion, and it only brought in 15 million. There's a big difference there. Those purchased tracts will still need to jump through a lot of hoops. So why weren't they sold? It seems as though there are, this has been one of the most high profile environmental battles in history. And it seems as though the oil companies are actually listening to conservation efforts. It's also true that banks will not fund. There are some banks that have refused to finance any new drilling projects because of climate change effects. It could be because people have been listening to the protests or listening to the logic that the environment needs our support. So there's change. With the sea level rise, global sea level rose about 6.7 inches in the last 100 years. Due to the rising temperatures of the ocean and the land and the atmosphere, the director of Environment and Sustainability in Miami Beach states, there's so much misinformation about what's happening. That's what breeds the skepticism. It's so important as a region that we go beyond the conversation of if it's happening to how, as a region, we need to be preparing. She says flatly, the sea levels are rising. The people in Miami Beach are feeling that change, as are people all over the world. So what's happening here is that when you listen to a radio in stereo, you can crank the volume way up, and there will come to a point where you get to that distortion, where the waves of sound get all muddled together when you turn it up so loud. Sound waves bouncing all around and creating chaos. And so that's what's happening on Earth right now, is the energy waves are crashing together. The imbalance creates this strange flows of energy all around the earth. And so there are still some, not many, that deny that climate change is happening at all, human-caused climate change. And yet there are some others that are just ignoring what's going on. Our global economy runs on fossil fuels. There are people here, if we consider this, that are climate inactivists. They are choosing to not take action for one reason or another. It could be that they don't believe the reports yet, that they're waiting for real data. They're waiting for the last moment to figure out a plan of action only when they're really sure that this is happening. And then there are those who acknowledge that climate change is happening, but they don't want to make a change for some reason. The strategies of these climate inactivists, they want to delay, they want to divide, they want to deceive with disinformation, they want to downplay and deflect the information that's going on. And often this is based around money and the economy. Our global economy definitely is based in fossil fuel use. Looking at this, the coal, okay, so the ones that are renewable energy are right there in the middle, the orange, the blue, and then the yellowish orange. Those are renewables, the hydroelectricity, and the nuclear energy. The others, the gray, the red, and the green, are the world's consumption of oil or fossil fuel-based energies. And so what's happening now in our politics is that there's been a dramatic shift. So the Biden administration has already made significant strides towards change. He's already working to undo what the previous administration had put into place in many cases. We have to continue to do this in order to make the planet habitable for humans at all, let alone all the other species that we've been talking about. So by 2035, we have the United States, President Biden has pledged that we will have zero carbon emissions from power. What that looks like is that we will use wind and solar and possibly nuclear, but nuclear isn't an optimal choice. Power plants are going to look incredibly different by that time, by 2035. There'll be big batteries storing the energy that's made from the solar and the wind and the hydroelectricity. Cars will not have combustion engines, and they won't all be Teslas and Priuses either. They'll be made by GM and Ford. They will be affordable to everyone. The big auto manufacturers are already on board with this plan. The goal is that we will be able to pull into charging stations and charge our vehicles in the time that it takes now to pump a tank full of gasoline. The other difference that folks are talking about is that we will see weather patterns that are more stable. So that's all by 2035. By 2050, the United States has pledged to be zero carbon emissions completely from all sources. There's now a climate envoy, John Kerry, who is serving on the White House Security Council. For the first time, climate will be made part of every choice, every decision that the White House makes. Every discussion will include John Kerry and the role of climate. And so there's all sorts of hope to be had here, even amidst what's going on right now. We have to keep working toward change because people are suffering. There are places that are experiencing extreme tumult because of climate change. Millions of people annually are displaced from their homes by catastrophic weather disasters, storms and droughts. And climate scientists just expect that number to rise. So from one extreme to the other, Burkina Faso is one of the countries most severely affected by desertification. Desertification is the often irreversible process that affects the Earth's surface, where the biosphere has disappeared. The life around has disappeared. It's not able to survive, which then leads to soil degradation and loss of nutrients, and therefore land fertility goes away, and the soil salinity, the salt levels continue to rise. And so the erosion, it's just a continuous cycle. And so this climate chaos is happening. And I used to say that Americans are not under as much climate pressure as other people of the world, but considering the hurricanes and the wildfires and the unusual Arctic temperatures that our country has experienced in this past year, I don't know that that's true anymore. And yet, in this moment, I can feel it. I can feel that the problem is so big and that I am so small. I am just one person. So in light of these huge social and environmental problems confronting us, many of us feel overwhelmed and powerless to do anything. It's as if we've been conditioned to believe that we can't do anything about these big problems. That's called learned helplessness. The idea came from research in psychology in the 1960s. A researcher, psychologist named Martin Seligman, he worked with dogs. And in the experiment, it was dogs being exposed to shock. And if the dogs could learn to leave where the shock was happening, if they could escape from the shock, then they didn't seem to have any long-lasting negative effects. But if a dog learned that he could not escape the shock, then later, when given a chance to escape, the dog would not even try. Until the researchers showed the dogs, by physically moving their legs, that they could move away from the shock. The dogs had learned that they were helpless until they were shown that they actually were not. The dogs unlearned the behavior. So we have discussed throughout this semester that we too can unlearn. And in this case, we can unlearn our helplessness. I showed you a video back at the beginning of this semester about Greta Thunberg, this astonishing young 18-year-old who has been able to be a leader because she's making and showing her commitment to personal change by not buying, by the choices of clothes that she's wearing, all of these things. But she is also speaking up. She's speaking up wherever people will listen, and bringing that systemic change. And so I can think, well, I'm not Greta, except that we can be. We can be. So there is this power to make, and then there's the power to influence others. And we have this voice. We all have this capacity of speaking up. And so how do we do that? How do we find that? I want you to take a look at this picture. And in your Zoom groups, I'd like you to take 2 minutes to think about What does this picture have to do with climate change? What connections do you make? Somebody said the more and more things we buy, the more and more things we throw away. Someone else said fast fashion is one of the most unsustainable things for the environment. So all of these are products that have been brought to this place that have consumed an amount of fossil fuels that's almost impossible to measure. So you see the jewelry store, the Zales, what did it take to mine the diamonds that are sold in that store? Somebody says everything is being sold in plastic bags. Someone else said it demonstrates companies' lack of concern for climate change, as many of the products are not environmentally friendly. Someone says the lights are on even though there are big windows, and all the cars that drove to the mall. The heating and cooling system in the mall contributes to global warming. So this has a lot to do with it. And it's just one place. It's just one mall. The increase in leisure causes an increase in energy use. Malls didn't exist a long time ago. These are beautiful connections that you're making. The amount of energy needed to keep all those lights on. Yes. So this is pretty important, but it's just one piece. We are in climate crisis right now. Crisis is a powerful word, and it's powerful to me because I can see that crisis is both danger and opportunity. If action is not taken, it will take the planet into an unprecedented climate future if we compare what has happened in all of our human evolutionary history. Climate change is shaping the future of our civilization. We must do something. As daunting as it seems, the alternative, ignoring the 2018 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, is continuing about our lives as if none of this has happened. And that's madness. This isn't just a science report. This is a few hundred of the world's best scientists screaming in a politically worded specificity for us to step up. This is something that we must do. We must remake society. It's dangerous if we don't. And yet the opportunity is huge. Transformational adaptation is necessary. But change hasn't happened. It hasn't happened by trying to frighten people into caring. Being scared doesn't work. We have to try a different approach. The idea that we are celebrating our choices. That's what this class is about. It's celebrating our choices. We can live in the place of danger, or we can live in the place of opportunity. We are creative. By virtue of being human, we are creative. And we can be courageous. Greta isn't the only one. We as individuals can be courageous. And so what happens if we shift the story? What happens if we stop trying to frighten people into making change? And what happens if we look at this from a place of love? What happens if we look at it because I want to take action, because I love this soil, because I love this lake, because I love this forest, because I love this field, because I love these birds, because I love this ocean, because I love the polar bears. So what would happen if we could see the connections between part 1 and part 2 of this course? What would change if the message was, we need to do this because of love? Gustav Speth says, the only thing we have to do to be sure we will leave a ruined world for our children and our grandchildren is to do exactly what we're doing right now. And I want grandchildren. And so we are in one of the most creative, meaningful, and transcendent eras of human history because we have to be. We have choices. We have creativity. We have courage to do this. And so I want you to deeply consider what that might mean for you and for others around you, for your families, for your connections, for what this world means to you. This Thursday is our next wellness day that the university is providing for us, and they are going to provide programming around intellectual and spiritual wellness that will include, they'll have all kinds of live and virtual in-person event, or live, virtual, as well as in-person events, recorded workshops, and self-paced options. And yet here I am, I'm considering, what is it that you can do? What can you do to create a plan for that day that is action for yourself from a place of love? What can you do that is courageous? And part of it might be considering what this class, particularly about climate, what does that mean? Here's your pack back prompt for today. Cultural revolution for the environment hasn't happened by trying to frighten people into caring or changing. What might happen if we act and encourage action from a place of love? Thank you all for being here. Thank you for deeply considering. Thank you for feeling and for being open, for being creative and courageous. And I look forward to hearing your ideas.